Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into this really powerful idea from Herminia Ibarra's book, Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. And the core concept is pretty wild. It says if you want to change how you think, you first have to change what you do. And it completely flips conventional wisdom on its head.
So, have you ever had that feeling where you're just spinning your wheels? I mean, you're putting in the hours, you're working harder than ever, but you're not actually moving forward, right? You're not getting into that bigger leadership role. You know you need to be more strategic, but you're just too busy.
So in the book, we meet this guy, Jacob. He's a production manager, and his whole life feels like he's on fire patrol, just constantly running from one crisis to the next to keep the lights on. He knows he needs to think more strategically, but he's just trapped in the day-to-day grind. Does that sound familiar? I bet it does for a lot of you. It's such a classic trap.
And that brings us right to our first big idea here, the leadership trap. This is the cycle that keeps really talented people like Jacob, and maybe even you, from ever really stepping up. And it's all built on this fundamental misunderstanding of how we actually grow as leaders.
You know, the traditional advice always tells us to look inward, right? Reflect, find your purpose, get in touch with your authentic self, and then, once you've figured all that out, then you can act. It's this whole inside-out approach. But here's the thing, Ibarra argues that's exactly what keeps us stuck. All that thinking just anchors us in who we used to be, not who we need to become. And this leads to something called the competency trap. So imagine Jeff. He's a star salesman, gets promoted to manager. And what does he do? He keeps jumping in and closing deals himself. Why? Well, because he's great at it. It feels good, it's comfortable. But by constantly doing what he already knows how to do, he never learns the new skills of being a manager, like coaching his team or thinking long-term. The very thing that made him successful was now holding him back.
Okay, so if that old way doesn't work, what's the alternative? Well, this brings us to the real heart of it all, the Outsight Principle. This is the counterintuitive but super powerful key to unlocking your leadership potential.
All right, let's break this down. Insight, that's all internal. It's what you already know from your past experiences, from thinking and reflecting. Outsight, on the other hand, is all external. It's the knowledge you gain from just jumping in and doing new things, from new experiences. It's knowledge from acting, not just from thinking. So, the real question is, how do we get more of it?
And this quote from Richard Pascal just nails it. Adults are more likely to act their way into a new way of thinking than to think their way into a new way of acting. Change doesn't happen in your head while you're staring at the wall. It happens when you get out there and get your hands dirty. Basically, your thinking follows what you do, not the other way around.
So here it is, the big idea, the Outsight Principle. The only way you're ever going to think like a leader is to first act like one. The point is, you don't go find your true, authentic self and then start to lead. No way. You start doing the work of a leader. You propose new ideas, you connect different people, you contribute outside of your regular job description. And it's through doing these things that you get that outsight. And that experience is what actually shapes you into a leader.
Okay, so how do we actually start acting? Where do we begin? Well, the very first step is to redefine what you do every single day.
So, check this out. A survey in the book looked at what skills are absolutely critical for leaders. And look at the top ones. 97% say collaborating across different units, 92% say inspiring others, 90% say getting buy-in. Notice a pattern here? None of these are things you do sitting alone at your desk. They're all about engagement with the wider organization.
And that brings up a really great question. Are you a hub or are you a bridge? See, a hub is focused internally, setting goals for the team, managing performance. That's important, for sure. But a real leader is a bridge. They connect their team's goals to the bigger organization. They get support from key allies. They build the team's reputation outside the department. To be truly strategic, you've got to be that bridge.
So how do you actually do that? Well, here are 5 really practical ways to start turning your job into a platform for leadership. Maybe you get involved in a project that's totally outside your normal area. Or you join an industry group, an extracurricular. You could even just start by creating a little bit of slack in your schedule so you have time to think and connect. The goal here is just to intentionally add things that give you that crucial outside perspective.
Okay, so once you start redefining your job, it naturally leads to our next big point, your network. You can't be a bridge if you don't actually build connections, right? You have to network across your company and even outside of it.
So let's just pause here for a second and be honest with yourself.
Think about the people you talk to about important work stuff. Are they all kind of the same? Are they mostly in your department thinking just like you? Because a real leadership network isn't just about having a lot of contacts. It's about how different those contacts are from you and from each other.
But man, building a diverse network is tough. And there are a couple of reasons why. The first is something the book calls the narcissistic principle. We are just naturally, spontaneously drawn to people who are like us. They get our jokes, they share our background, they speak our language. It just feels comfortable.
And the second barrier, it's the lazy principle. Let's be real, it's just easier to hang out with people we already know. It takes way more effort to build a real relationship with someone from a totally different part of the business. So we often just don't. And these two things together, the narcissistic principle and the lazy principle, they keep our network small, stale, and totally starved of the outside we desperately need.
All right, so we've talked about the problem, that big old competency trap, and we've talked about the solution, getting more outsight by changing up your job and your network. So the big question now is, what are you going to do about it?
Look, if you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this mantra. Act your way into a new way of thinking. Don't wait around for some flash of inspiration. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Just start doing. Because action is the engine of insight.
So that brings me to my final challenge for you. What one action will you take this week to gain some outsight? Will you volunteer for that cross-functional project? Will you finally schedule that coffee with someone from a different department? Or maybe you'll just block 30 minutes in your calendar to think about who you need to connect with. Remember, the journey to thinking like a leader doesn't start with some grand 5-year plan. It starts with one small, concrete action. What will yours be?